to go, and we've got enough content that I think we're going to need pretty much the entire hour to make it through. But what we're talking about today is program mapping. My fun background picture is a 1507 map of the world, and the reason that I chose it was because it was a good map, but quite an imperfect map, knowing what we know today. And I'm going to presume and try to demonstrate for you throughout this webinar that is exactly where we are when it comes to the services that we offer in local government, and trying to come to understand who offers similar services in our region, and how might we create a more precise map of who's doing what. The next question that you might have is, why do we care about that? And that is the point of the rest of the webinar. So I thought it'd be pretty fun. I do this sometimes. Maybe you do it with your friends, is kind of do the ask multiple times why to a question and keep on trying to answer it for yourself. It's pretty fun. So why are we talking about program mapping? Why is this an interesting application? And the first reason is because maybe we want to know who the other service providers are in our region, who they are, and what kind of services they offer. So that would be one reason why you want to get into program mapping. So you ask the next question, well, why do we want to know that? Why would we care who the other service providers are and what services they offer? And the answer to that is because if these other service providers are maybe capable of offering similar services as we are, maybe we could partner with them. Maybe we can outsource to them, or maybe we can in-source programs from them. So your next question might be, well, why would we want to know that? And the answer is because if we can maybe merge with them, maybe there's an efficiency that we can gain. If we could gain an efficiency, we could free up our own resources. If we could outsource to them, maybe we could free up our own resources, our own people, our own money. Or if we in-source from them, maybe we could bring in additional revenue, new resources to our organization. So the plot thickens for this program mapping. Well, why would we want to know that? Why would we want to free up these resources or generate new revenue? And now hopefully we're reaching a connection point, because there are so many services that we need to be offering today to make our communities fantastic for the future, and so many services that need to grow, where we need more money. And the constant problem that we are trying to solve in all of our work together is that it seems that we don't have the people or the money to launch these services that we want to get into, and therefore that is the punchline. Program mapping ultimately is this strategy, is the technique that we're going to go through today that leads to the funding that we need to fund the future that we want to create, the new programs that we want to launch, or the current programs that we're offering that are of a high priority that ultimately need enhancement. And that is ultimately what the blueprint was all about. For those of you who attended the Priority-Based Budgeting Bootcamp and Summit this year, this was the main theme. For those who weren't there, this is what we just articulated in the last slide, why program mapping. But the whole premise is that whether we're doing priority-based budgeting or this applied PBB data known as program mapping, the whole point of all of our work is that we're trying to resource the future. We're trying to make sure that for the new needs that we need to address in our communities, that we have the funding to do it. And what's going to be very interesting in this application of program mapping is that we see kind of two fronts. The first, when it comes to trying to come up with ways to be a regional service provider, or in other words, in-source programs from other service providing entities. We're seeing some great progress being made in terms of setting yourself up to be that regional service provider and generate new income for your organization, new income with which you could fund new programs or enhance current programs that need more money. Or the other side of the coin, we can be looking at ways to free up our own human resources and financial resources in order to funnel them, reinvest in the new programs that we need to launch. So that is the blueprint, and program mapping is going to focus in on both of those specific techniques. So kind of a bit of early inspiration where all this got started. We go back to some of my earliest work, even prior to working on any of the priority-based budgeting work. I did have the chance to work with City of Inglewood when they were becoming a regional fleet services provider. And this is what insourcing looks like at its best. At some point in time, the City of Inglewood realized that, yes, they were offering fleet services. They had a garage, they had maintenance folks, and it was a quite capable operation. And as this city was starting to look at some of its neighbors, as you see here, the city of Sheridan and Cherry Hills Village, and also the Inglewood School District, what Inglewood realized was that if they were able to insource services, then it would create a win-win where Sheridan and Cherry Hills Village would ultimately pay less for all of their fleet services needs, pay less than what they were paying at that time, by simply giving Inglewood the money. And Inglewood, even though they had to staff up to meet the needs of Sheridan, Cherry Hills Village, and Inglewood School District, their costs would go up. The revenues that they would collect from both Sheridan, Cherry Hills Village, and the school district were more than enough to cover the cost. So it wasn't even a break-even situation. They actually brought in more money, and with those additional revenues, they could launch more programs overall. So this is like the simplest example, but something that was quite inspirational in the beginning. Is here's this idea where, for any of us and the services we provide, maybe we're best positioned when we think about who are the other potential service providers in our community, to insource, to be a regional service provider. And even though our costs might go up, maybe our revenues could go up even further. And this is like a really neat idea. Well, and then you can look at it from the other side of the coin. And the title of the slide is whether you're insourcing or outsourcing. It's a function of your perspective. And as we think about Inglewood, and many of you have heard the story that Eric Keck talks about as city manager of Inglewood, when he was assessing the needs for their fire department into the future and adding up all the costs from deferred maintenance over the years, deferred maintenance of vehicles, deferred maintenance of facilities. The amount of money that Eric calculated for the city of Inglewood to get up to par where they needed to be to have an adequate fire response and adequate facilities and equipment was more money than Eric had to spend. And so instead of insourcing in this case, Eric looked for other partners. And of the couple that he was taking a look at, South Metro Fire in this case, another regional fire protection district, and the city of Denver, ultimately Eric Keck decided to outsource fire and pay the Denver Fire Department. Denver Fire in this case is insourcing the program for additional revenue. The city of Inglewood found a win-win in the sense that they could pay Denver Fire less money than what it would have cost Inglewood to get their fire department up to speed. So here was a classic example. And so now you're starting to think how powerful this could be once we start to realize maybe our own local governments don't have to provide all of the programs if we could find another partner, perhaps to take it off of our plate for less money and allow us to free up our own resources and do good things. And so if those are insourcing opportunities and outsourcing opportunities, the third of the opportunity areas is where you're neither insourcing or outsourcing, you're merging. You're jointly providing a program with another service provider. And that's exactly what Washington County has done in multiple areas. But again, early inspirations in Washington County will come back up again later on in the presentation on how you actually do this. But the campaign that Josh Showman talked about during the Priority-Based Budgeting Summit this year was their Counties Without Borders campaign overall. And at least one of the wins that meets this kind of merger and partnership opportunity area was when they merged health departments. So what they did is they reached out to some of their neighboring counties. That's what Counties Without Borders was all about, and started to compare the program inventory that Washington County had come up with, simply asking the other entities, do you provide similar things? And might we find a win-win opportunity if we merge to create an efficiency for how we deliver programs. And as the two health departments of Washington County and one of its neighbors merged together, yes, they found that there were redundancies. Yes, they eliminated redundancies, but they didn't necessarily eliminate staff. They were able to reallocate those positions to launch programs that neither one of the entities was able to start before without raising tax dollars. And so that's a perfect win-win in the merger category for how to create these efficiencies. And as you continue to learn from the Washington County story, they have continued down this path for literally dozens of programs. So the light bulb moment occurs when we start to think through, okay, we have the opportunity. If I'm in your community's shoes, if I'm working with your priority-based budgeting data, what I'm trying to look for as we think about the impetus for program mapping, I'm trying to find entrepreneurially, are there opportunities where we are really well situated as an organization to in-source programs? And if we could do that, kind of like Inglewood Fire, yes, our costs may go up, maybe they won't, but the revenues that we could generate would more than offset the costs of being a regional service provider. So I want to think through how many of these types of opportunities are there where we can generate revenue. And as you think about the position that most local governments are in, local government tends to be one of the bigger players in a region, certainly compared to some of the smaller entities, maybe the nonprofits, if you have special districts around, even small businesses, this could be a real opportunity for some of the programs that you provide. Conversely, opportunistically, you might be looking for any programs where you would love to take advantage of another potential service provider and get programs off of your plate, where you recognize that somebody else is going to be that regional service provider, or somebody else is well equipped to take over a program that maybe you once got into the business of providing, but you don't have to anymore. And if you can find who those partners are and advantageously outsource, you free up your obligations. You can free up the money and the human resources that you had previously had to dedicate to that program in order to reinvest those resources towards other programs that you wish to start. And as you think about Inglewood Fire, Inglewood Fleet, or the Washington County Health Department, where this started to get really exciting down the program mapping path, was how far could we take this? What if you could find in the city of Inglewood more than just the fleet operation situation? What if they could identify what everybody is doing and find multiple cases of a regionalized fleet opportunity to continue to generate revenue? How far could we go? And on the other side of the coin, what if they were also looking for every single opportunity, just like the Denver Fire outsourcing example, to figure out there are more and more services that they could count on other potential service providers to provide? And if they just knew who else was out there and what they're doing, where those redundancies or overlaps were taking place, maybe they could advantageously outsource. And so I love thinking in extremes, and that's exactly where we started to get very excited, especially with what Washington County was doing as well. How far could we take this? What if we could continue to look for all of these opportunities? And finally, the realization was we need a map, kind of back to that 1507 map of the world. When I asked the question to some of our implementers, do you know who else is out there? Do you know the other service providers and what they provide? The answer is almost always, well, of course we do. It's almost like unbelievable that you would not know who your potential partners are. But when it comes down to the program level, this is where things get exciting and where the secret in all of this actually exists. So first, we need a map. We need to understand who's out there, what services they're providing, and then we can start to take a more practical, methodical approach to insourcing, to outsourcing, and to merging and forming these partnerships overall. One more flashback. I'm pretty sure Eric Bamoria is on the line from the city of Boise, Idaho. But when I first met Eric, It was back when he was at the city of San Jose, California. And City of San Jose was actually the first organization to come up with an additional basic program attribute. And the basic program attribute was the degree of reliance. And at first, we were just really fascinated with this in the background. And San Jose was already on this path. They wanted to tag every program not only with our traditional basic program attributes of degree of mandate, cost recovery, size of population served, and change in demand, but additionally, they were wondering, even if we don't have perfect data right now, what's our best guess? What's our best judgment towards this question? Are citizens reliant upon us as a service providing entity, or are there others out there who are providing similar services? And so we added it to the basic program attributes and found it to be so valuable, we kept it forever. At this point, what's becoming really interesting is that this approach to program mapping, trying to find out, is it true how programs were scored in the reliance category? And what does it mean when we find out that somebody is providing a similar service? What can we do about it? That's where this is becoming really fascinating. So a quick example, and I know this is one that has been shared. We're going to actually get into some other new stories here in just a second. But it illustrates this point about reliance. It illustrates the point about the secret when it comes to the program level, that maybe we don't necessarily know who's providing what. So Moffat County, Colorado is a very small organization in a remote rural area of northwestern Colorado. And they were excited about this program mapping opportunity, and they invited just a couple of their neighbors. Moffat County, the county seat, which is the city of Craig, Colorado, they invited their hospital district, the Memorial Regional Hospital. They invited their school district, and they all came together, these other entities. By the way, none of the other entities have done any program inventory or any priority-based budgeting. That's totally okay. Moffat County, having gone through this work, having created a program inventory and program costs, serves in this case as a catalyst community. The other entities can map to Moffat County's programs looking for these program opportunity areas. And as the story goes, we hosted a half-day workshop, and about 5 minutes into the workshop, the hospital director said, "Wow, I am looking over your program inventory, Moffat County, and I'm surprised to come across laundry facilities. Can you tell me more? What's going on with this laundry facility at Moffat County?" When I think of Moffat County as the CEO of Memorial Regional Hospital, I think of the Sheriff's Department. I think of the Clerk and Recorder, Department of Motor Vehicles, Elections, Road and Bridge, Coroner. I do not think of laundry coming out of Moffat County. And the county responded and said, yes, we actually have quite a substantial laundry facility involved with our detention center to meet some of our demands over in the jail. And beyond that, we have another operation as well. And the hospital director said, wow, it would never have occurred to me that the county right here in our own neighborhood, in this small region where we know pretty much everything about everybody, offers laundry. And the reason that this was intriguing is because the hospital actually ships its laundry, as you see here on the map, 2.5 hours from Moffat County and the county seat of Craig down to Grand Junction, pretty much on a weekly basis. It's several $100,000 to the hospital, to the small hospital, every single year in their budget. And the hospital CEO was saying, had I known that the county had laundry facilities and services right here in my own backyard, I would easily be paying you, saving at least some fraction of that several $100,000 budget price tag. And that's exactly what they're working on. One new twist in this story is that the school district has recently come forward to say that they want a part in that partnership as well, because they also have laundry needs, and they can partner with Moffat County too. So what was kind of mind-blowing when you looked at all of the program matchup opportunities with Moffat County and these other regional providers in their own neighborhood, and they only had 4 at the table, when we could calculate all of the programs that matched up, in other words, where another entity was paying for something similar or providing a similar service as the county government, 59% of Moffat County's current budget is directed towards these programs that overlap with these other service providers. Now, what's not evident is that of that 59%, will Moffat County outsource some portion of that? Might they find themselves in a position where they're the best regional service provider and actually insource? Or might they merge and look for a program efficiency? The exciting part is that it doesn't really matter. What we're saying is that 59% of Moffat County's budget is on the table for one of those three opportunity areas, meaning only 41% of what Moffat County provides today, they appear to be uniquely qualified to provide, the only possible service provider overall. So extrapolating, we looked across all of the data in our online priority-based budgeting database, and kind of going back to what San Jose had come up with for the reliance factor. If you think about what we're talking about low degree of reliance, right? There's another service provider out there. Maybe they're in the public sector, maybe they're in the private sector, but somebody else is out there who provides a similar service. And what I'm showing here on the chart is if we treated the entire priority-based budgeting community as one across our entire database, very much in line with the Moffat County data, it appears for low degree of reliance, based on your department scores and peer review scores, 60% of what we all offer, therefore on average, it appears to be low degree of reliance, appears to be programs that are offered by others, meaning maybe only 40% of what we provide, we are truly being relied upon as uniquely qualified to provide those programs overall. That means that 60% of our budget is involved with programs that are at least opportunity areas for us to figure out maybe we can outsource, maybe we can insource, maybe we can merge and create an efficiency. And if we can just crack into some portion of that 60%, going all the way back to the PBB blueprint, this is a substantial opportunity area. It's not small, a substantial opportunity area to look for new resources to fund those new programs that we want to get into. All right, so moving from the why do we get into this, more into the how, I wanted to share some actual case studies from communities who have gone through this recently so that you can start to get the idea of how program mapping works, how you might do it using your own priority-based budgeting data, and also by telling the stories, encourage you to reach out to some of these other implementers in the PBB community to get some insight into how they've done this overall. First story just comes from actually last week, and it goes back to Inglewood. By the way, if you haven't heard already, we've been so happy with the implementation and the work coming out of the city of Inglewood, Colorado. We hired their city manager, Eric Keck. He joins our team actually this weekend in Baltimore for the ICMA conference. So come by, Eric will be there. And Eric will join us officially in October. But we were just the other day doing a program matchup that involved the city of Inglewood and their neighbor, the city of Littleton. And what's fascinating about this story is that Inglewood implemented priority-based budgeting first. They went through, just like you, the program inventory, they did program costing, they scored their programs. And when the city of Littleton started their implementation, this notion of program partnerships was already being talked about. It was one of the reasons that Littleton implemented. They are the neighbors of the city of Inglewood. And to kick off their implementation in Littleton, they actually had the benefit, that's what this graphic is meant to show, Littleton had the benefit of scanning through the city of Inglewood's program inventory as they got started. And the reason that was important is because as Littleton inventoried their programs and created that first starting place, they could create it with the end in mind, already anticipating that by the time they were done implementing, they wanted to have somewhat of a common nomenclature for program names so that they could look for these program partnership opportunities. So fast forward, Littleton is now also done with their PBB implementation. And the very first thing that they wanted to do was host a two-city program matchup. And what this looked like, we got together in Littleton City Hall. So you've got a contingent Team Inglewood, you've got a contingent Team Littleton, and Littleton reviewed Inglewood's programs, Inglewood reviewed Littleton's programs, looking for these partnership opportunities overall. And within the tool set, specifically, there was a downloadable program matchup worksheet. And to give you a sense for how simple this actually was, when Littleton was reviewing Inglewood's programs, they would simply go through the list, reviewing programs by name, by program description, and indicate, yes, do we match up, or no, we actually, this is a unique offering from our city, and then vice versa. Inglewood reviewed Littleton's programs and looked for program matchup opportunities as well. Beyond just matching up yes or no, there were a couple of other filters. It's just like program scoring, right? A couple of other filters, including using your best judgment, does this appear to be a high value opportunity if we were to go after it versus a low value opportunity? In other words, if we were to come up with a solution on a partnership for a high dollar program, that would be a high value opportunity to pursue. Whereas if it was a program currently offered by volunteers, or the dollar amount was under 10,000 as an example, maybe that's a low degree of value, and that's going to help them filter their insourcing and outsourcing and partnership opportunities in their next step, and prioritize what they go after first of the plethora of examples that came out. Another category, there was high or low order of magnitude of value of the opportunity on the table. There was high or low order of magnitude of complexity. So in the room, they were talking about how, yes, they both provide police departments, but if they wanted to go after perhaps a joint dispatch unit, that might be more complicated. So the complexity would be high versus what they got into next. Taking a look at something like utility billing, the complexity of partnering on utility billing might be low. So that could be that's a higher value opportunity. High dollar, low complexity, high value, we match up. This is awesome. This is exactly what we're looking for. And what I'm demonstrating for you right now, this is actually from the open data site from the city of Inglewood. And I've simply zoomed in what the output looks like in the tools. All the partnerships that are coming back to Inglewood from the city of Littleton in this case, their insourcing opportunities, their outsourcing opportunities, and all of them put together. One of the comments that was made during the matchup exercise that we just thought was fantastic, and it becomes quite obvious and actually starts to lead to more and more examples. Littleton city manager said, you know, this is quite interesting. We take a function like utility billing, and you know, for all that is said about the uniqueness of our cities, that is true about our community character, our downtowns, the differences between us, why one person decides to live in Littleton versus Inglewood or vice versa. The comment was, when it comes down to something like utility billing, there is no Inglewood way to do utility billing, and there's no Littleton way of doing utility billing. And the question on the table was, why haven't we been talking about how to partner on a service like this? This makes total sense. Why do we have separate and distinct operations? The conversation went so far as to what emerged was one proposal. Why don't we just merge these two cities all together? And that might be a little bit too extreme. Nobody liked the names either. There was Littlewood and Ingleton, but for what it's worth, once you start to think at this programmatic level, it starts to snowball, and we can look across all of the programs, across all the departments, looking for these matchup opportunities. And this is indeed a program map colored darker where the program matchup opportunities exist. Final point on Littleton Inglewood here. Another comment that came from Littleton city manager was, as they're starting to go through Inglewood and they're looking at utility billing, this was a two-city program matchup, and their next question was, where's Arapahoe County? That's the county where both cities exist. They said, it's only a matter of time before we need to reach out to the county and have them match up to what we're doing. It makes zero sense that we would stop here with two cities combining and looking at our own organization. We must start to roll this out to other service providing entities, and that's exactly what their next step is going to look like. So on that, in that spirit, we moved from Inglewood Littleton to the city of Shawnee, Kansas. And this just occurred 1 week after the Priority-Based Budgeting Summit in August. So City of Shawnee hosted a program matchup, and they partnered with their Chamber of Commerce. It was a brilliant idea. They offered pancakes in the morning, and we did this exact same style of program matchup. Shawnee, with their same open data site, invited participants, other service providers in their community, both from the public sector and the private sector, to come and match up against the City of Shawnee's programs. This as well took just a couple of hours for the on-site workshop. These pictures demonstrate who all came in the room, and there was something like 40 participants or so overall. The Chamber of Commerce, in their case, invited other private sector businesses within the City of Shawnee. It wasn't full representation of every possible business, but the Chamber had some insight on what the city does and specifically invited some particular players who they knew would be interested in looking at program matchup opportunities. But it wasn't just the private sector. Other public sector entities came as well, including neighboring cities. There were two. You see across that top bar, these are examples of other public sector agencies who came: the city of Lake Quivira, Kansas City, Missouri Park District overall. This is one of the school districts that you see up here as well, just like you saw in Moffat County. The school district, when it comes to program matchups, actually has a lot in common with what the city provides. Nothing to do with educational services overall. However, in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, it appears that there is a city-run preschool, which is at least on the table for discussion for how that coordination may work with the school district overall. But in Shawnee, they invited the school district. They were talking about everything from grounds maintenance, athletic fields, to janitorial services and internal services as well. As we zero in on the map, this is really cool. These are three separate entities. And again, the darker the color indicates where programs matched up with Shawnee and the participating entity. So here's Lake Quivira, which, just as you look compared to the other two entities, had a lot of program matchup opportunity. That's exactly what you would expect. Lake Quivira is a smaller city outside of the city of Shawnee, and as their city manager was scouring Shawnee's program inventory data, she was coming up with many opportunities and many outsourcing opportunities from the perspective of the city of Lake Quivira, and thereby insourcing opportunities for the city of Shawnee. In particular, the city manager was very interested in the Inglewood story about outsourcing fire department, and the city manager was reflecting she's facing the exact same situation where the costs are so high to just get back to normal for infrastructure, for vehicle maintenance in their fire department, and basic facilities, let alone the fact that they're behind on their pay scale. She had not considered this before, that maybe the real solution is to look to the city of Shawnee to absorb that program. Lake Quivira would pay the city of Shawnee. Shawnee would provide a more regional fire response. And it's looking like a great opportunity overall. And you can see, you can actually go live to the City of Shawnee's website and play around with this. I encourage you to do so, City of Shawnee, Kansas, and look at some of the other partners, how they've matched up, and it becomes really interesting. They had a local technology company who is obviously quite interested in things like the print shop going on in the City of Shawnee. A funny example was from the Holiday Inn Express. So they had a franchise owner of the Holiday Inn Express who came to attend, and as she was matching up programs with the City of Shawnee, it turns out if you're a franchise owner, at least to the best of my understanding, of a Holiday Inn Express, you are responsible for your own profitability. You're responsible for everything from facilities, janitorial, even grounds maintenance, and in her case, even street maintenance. They have a little access road and, of course, their parking lot. And her feeling overall was Holiday Inn Express is not getting a great deal from their local vendor. And so she was talking about this in the middle of the meeting, looking at the right-of-way maintenance, looking at street maintenance and asphalt maintenance from the City of Shawnee. And she wanted to bring the City of Shawnee to the table to at least talk to the current vendor and talk about pricing and how they do things differently. Bottom line, a conversation like this would have never happened at the program level. Someone said from one of the neighboring cities, you know, we meet each other at ICMA maybe, we have city manager meetings locally, but no one asks the other person, how are things going with animal control? How much are you paying your dog catcher? And that, while that was a funny comment, the point was we never talk about the program level. That's exactly what's taking place in Shawnee. Another story, and very similar and related, Clear Creek County, Colorado, also invited as many local providers as possible, local governments, special districts, a lot of special districts here in Colorado, nonprofit organizations overall, and doing the final analysis just like Moffat County, they came up with roughly 79% of the programs that they offer were also being provided. They cast a wide net of possible service providers. They had several cities, all the cities from within the county came to participate in the program matchup, which is just quite compelling for any county out there, even Washington County, who has done, you know, totally inspirational work, thinking about all of the local towns, villages to participate in a matchup. The sky's the limit on who you can bring in. What was interesting in Clear Creek and what they're dealing with right now is that of these smaller special districts, there are a lot of insourcing opportunities for the county. For the smaller cities, a fleet consolidation makes a lot of sense. A lot of the smaller cities don't have the resources to fund fleet replacement, let alone a nice facility or a garage for ongoing maintenance. So insourcing fleet makes a lot of sense for Clear Creek County. And then smaller functions, even like payroll and HR, a lot of the smaller special districts have part-time FTEs or they pay to outsource it today. So they're looking towards Clear Creek to absorb that type of program. It would be less money for the special districts, more income for Clear Creek, even if they have to staff up. Again, you only do these things if there's a win-win on the table. But all of this is sounding so good so far. I thought I'd throw in, you know, uncharacteristic of me, always looking at the optimistic side of things, but it's important to address something for the skeptics. And one question that might be on your minds, it certainly has been a comment that I faced from some priority-based budgeting communities as they're thinking about getting started with a program mapping is, well, from all the stories you've told so far, they must have great relationships with all of their neighbors. They must have these exceptional ties, and that's just not our culture. We don't even talk to our neighbors. In fact, some organizations go so far to say they don't respect what their neighbors do. They would never look to them for a program partnership. Well, I bring back Clear Creek County. As everybody got together, again, all of the cities within the county, special districts, a couple from the private sector, school district, and so on, the county administrator from Clear Creek County addressed the audience, and as he was looking around, talking to people, he said, from my perspective, I've been here for a few years, I don't know if anything like this, you know, have we ever talked as a group like this about what we do and where partnerships could occur? And Keith, being relatively new to the county, used the term in a couple years. I don't remember anything like this happening. And the response from many of the city managers and some of the elected officials in the room was, this hasn't happened in anybody's recent memory. So it wasn't that they had these already established relationships already with these local service providers. The program matchup offered a very reasonable, practical forum for people to get together, and that's kind of a win-win. Another example, which I'll get to here in just a second, City of Toledo. So the work that the city is starting to do with its Chamber of Commerce representing companies within the City of Toledo, one might suspect, oh, they must have fostered this great relationship with the Chamber. That's how this must be happening. And if you talk to people from the city or you talk to people from the Chamber, it's definitely a relationship that they've been working on over the years. But this was not something that was automatic. And again, this data sharing in Toledo's case, not only with the Chamber, but outward towards the rest of the public, it takes initiative, but they're not building from already wonderful, ideal, Nirvana-esque relationships already. They're using the matchup exercise to start to build these relationships, invite people in, be the catalyst community, and share your data overall. So Real quickly, speaking of Toledo, for those who might not be familiar exactly with their story, it is very interesting because while Shawnee is talking to other public and private sector entities, we've got Washington County and their Counties Without Borders. We've got Clear Creek County and all those entities. Toledo is taking the steps to share its program inventory data overall with the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce is taking a methodical review of these programs and starting to think through, well, how can we help the city to at least understand who are these other potential vendors? And the point of view from the Chamber is this: the city of Toledo may have got into the business of providing certain programs for very good reason. Maybe there was nobody else around at the time when Toledo got into, say, the street sweeping business. And it was up to city government to do that. There was nobody else around who was providing street sweeping. You fast forward to today, and it's simply not true any longer. And it's at least worth considering what would happen, even for a high priority program like street sweeping, if the city was able to engage with its private sector partners. Perhaps the private sector could be energized in Toledo, where economic vitality is definitely one of their higher priority result areas. Maybe it's a good thing for business growth and development, but again, you only do this if it's a win-win overall. So here's a program that by the costing done in the city's PBB process, $4.2 million street sweeping program. And if the city can work with the chamber, work with some of these other vendors to figure out either a less expensive approach to street sweeping, so in other words, an efficiency overall, or to outsource it in order for the city to free up its own resources and redirect them elsewhere, that is the win-win that would make sense. Similar program, leaf collection, leaf pickup in the city of Toledo. This is a program not every city provides overall, but it's $3.5 million for everything that goes into leaf collection. Same question on the table. Who else is out there who might be able to provide this program overall? General questions, as you look at the program revenue in terms of the charge for service being reported as zero, the question on the table is, would residents actually pay for the benefit of having leaf collection as a service overall, or is this a general assessment, a general tax applied to everybody, and therefore this program is automatically prioritized? What are the other options that they have to consider other service providers opportunistically outsource in order to free up resources, perhaps to reinvest in other areas? Finally, one other kind of interesting thought for you regarding Toledo that is really cool. Their mayor had earlier this year in February launched what they call the Recreation Task Force. Exact same concept. So, but it's totally focused. They're looking specifically within recreation, within parks, to observe the other service providers. They could name a number of them: other businesses, nonprofits, the YMCA, Toledo Public Schools, Washington Local Schools, Metro Parks Toledo. They are very aware of some of the other service providers, but what they're also realizing now is with PBB data, perhaps they can share their program inventory to figure out what is the YCMA actually doing? What is Toledo Public Schools actually providing? Where could these partnerships take place? So a takeaway for you might be, while some of the overall program matchups look great, if that is not practical or too large for you to get started, certainly something like Toledo is working on with a specific direct strike one department program matchup also makes a lot of sense overall. So we move on, and I'm coming towards a conclusion here, I promise. You think about where this might go next and going further and further with program mapping. One of the initiatives that we are working on for the rest of 2018, and it will continue into 2019, we recognize that we have an abundance of PBB implementers across the state of Colorado. There's like 28 current priority-based budgeting implementers who have at least gone through program inventory, program costing. And just like the Inglewood-Littleton matchup with two cities, there's a very interesting opportunity on the table. One is for current PBB implementers, they can certainly share data with one another just like Englewood did with Littleton, and that's a complete win-win. So we're looking at expanding. Our first workshop will also broaden out to a special district, Highlands Ranch, and the town of Parker, all PBB implementers. But what they're also thinking of doing is, with all of these current implementers having created their data, they are all PBB catalysts, and therefore, just like Shawnee, they all can invite others who have not gone through priority-based budgeting to at least match up to the current inventories identified by Englewood, Littleton, Highlands Ranch, and Parker. The impact of that, so we've got 5 workshops where we have this density where the current implementers can all be catalysts to invite many, many more non-implementers to look for these partnership opportunities. That's where this whole concept got started. It became very exciting and interesting. But if you think about it, and this is part of the agreement for some of the non-PBBers and participants, it's even beyond partnerships. Clearly, program partnerships are one of the major takeaways. Anybody who comes to a workshop will match up to a current service provider and know, hey, Englewood provides utility billing, and this is an opportunity area for me if I'm in the neighboring city of Lone Tree who has not gone through this before. So program partnerships, clearly an outcome. But over here on the left, we can also start to think through, what about benchmarking data? As there are more and more participants, people who match up their programs to current implementers, we can start to understand who's doing what across regions and begin to benchmark. Finally, when it comes to policy intelligence, being able to compare across multiple implementers for things like revenue cost recovery. Who's offering a program with business license or inspections and charging full cost recovery versus others who totally subsidize it, or who outsources the jail, and are they getting a good deal out of that versus other entities who are not. Part of our dream, the more data that we can share as well through mapping, the more insights that everybody can glean as they start to compare data. Last but not least, right now in the Edmonton metro area, including Strathcona County, actually led by Kelly Rudick, who, if you don't know Kelly, is another person, please reach out to him, recognizing that there are many different PBB implementers in the region. I think Alan Harris is on the call from Beaumont as well. Kelly has reached out to the Chamber in Edmonton. The Chamber of Commerce in Edmonton is recognizing all the great work that Strathcona County has done, and the Chamber of Commerce has become aware of the great work of the city of Toledo and its chamber, and the city of Shawnee and its chamber, and you're starting to see this sort of best practice emerge, where a Chamber of Commerce can be such a great player here. So coming up in November, we believe, we're working on an on-site large regional area program matchup for all Edmonton area local governments, the PBB Catalyst communities, and others who have not gone through it. I think what's really interesting in Alberta, and that's the pop-ups that have just appeared, they actually have it written into provincial code that there is an intermunicipal collaboration requirement that local governments have to demonstrate back to the province how they are looking towards neighbors, looking towards other potential service providers for these partnership opportunities. That is something, at least that I'm not aware of in the States, but provides further impetus and motivation for the type of sharing and program mapping that is about to take place out there in Alberta. Here we go towards the conclusion. How do you do this? Hopefully, throughout this webinar, you've seen a ton of examples for different ways to go about it. The thought process is, well, if you're going to walk away from this webinar, how might you begin? First and foremost, can't say enough about Washington County, Wisconsin, and the great work that they're doing. They recognized this early on, that they had no other choice, as they word it, to optimize their resources, to be as responsible as possible. And they took it upon themselves as a PBB Catalyst community, meaning they had their program inventory, they had program costs, they knew degree of mandate, and so on. They wrote a letter, very simple, to their neighbors and said, we're looking for these opportunities to look for cooperative partnerships, shared service agreements, insourcing, outsourcing, mergers, and even a complete consolidation overall. You can talk to the folks from Washington County. There's Josh Showman, Jamie Ludovic, there's Kathy Wild, and Aaron, I think, is on this call, but I'm not positive about that. They took it upon themselves to just start reaching out to some of their local providers, just like Toledo Parks was doing in their recreation task force. So that is totally available to everybody right now. You don't need to necessarily do a program matchup with us. You can reach out and do it on your own and look to Washington County and see how they did it overall. With us, we're getting very excited about how these program matchups are working. Shawnee's was great. They're pretty concise. And now we've repeated it in Shawnee, Littleton, Englewood, Clear Creek County, Moffett County, and I think Kevin's on the line from Battle Creek, Michigan. We're going to do, or at least we've got the idea of a Kalamazoo, Battle Creek. They're not that far from one another for a program matchup as well. In tandem with what a lot of you have seen from the open data website that we showed for Englewood, Littleton, and Shawnee during this webinar, which has become a really nice tool as an outcome for the matchup to demonstrate provided deliverable back to participants where those matchup opportunities exist, to organize it and prioritize your highest value opportunities to go after for regional insourcing, for revenue, outsourcing, freeing up resources, mergers, and partnerships overall. We're really excited about the open data platform for program matchups. As Littleton was talking about inviting more and more participants, they had this idea. They said, well, you know, an on-site workshop for the matchup is great, but what if this was open to any possible service provider to match up at any time throughout the year? Do we need to go and have a workshop with Arapahoe County? Sure, that'd be great for some relationship building. What if it was always open and we can encourage others to come onto our website, indicate that they are matching up with the program, and at least get the ball rolling for a discussion for where partnerships could occur? Nolan from the city of Shawnee, their city manager, said the exact same thing and wanted to post at least a link and an advertisement on the Chamber's website inviting the exact same approach, that it's not just something that happens once during a matchup, even though it's a great way to get started, but that this is always open for any potential service provider to map to your programs overall for the reason of finding out who's out there, who's doing what, and looking for these resource optimization opportunities. That's a wrap on the program mapping webinar. Definitely appreciate everybody sticking around for the duration. We are available to provide these slides back to everybody, and certainly we would love to host a program matchup with you if you're interested, or to launch the Open PBB Data website if you are interested in doing some of your own program mapping overall. But congratulations to all of those who have made such progress in this totally pioneering approach. There's nothing like it as far as we know that's going on right now, and you're creating quite a compelling view of who's providing services and where these partnerships could actually occur. Thanks very much, and that's a wrap.